Hello everyone. In today's video I bring you an impressive story full of hidden revelations. Let's meet Abigail Monroe, an American nun who had a shattering near-death experience and discovered a shocking truth about the church and the future of faith in the world. What she saw on the other side will leave you in shock. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching this video from. I'd love to know. Now get ready to dive into a journey that will shake everything you believe in. My name is Sister Abigail Monroe. I'm 57 years old, and for nearly 4 decades I've been part of a small discreet order in Savannah, Georgia. Since I was a little girl, I dreamed of serving God. I dreamed of that pure dedication of body and soul. I made my vows at 19, and since then I have lived to pray, care for the poor, obey. I believed. I believed with everything I was until that October morning when the life I knew ended. I was on my way to a community mission, driving my old truck through thick fog. I was praying the rosary, as always, asking for protection, asking for light, and then it was as if the world stopped. A truck lost around the bend, lights, metal. The impact was like the sound of the sky tearing apart. I felt the crack in my bones, the glass cutting into my skin, and then nothing. A silence so absolute that it seemed bigger than the universe. I thought I had died, but it wasn't how I thought it would be. I was floating. I saw my body crushed between the wreckage, the smoke rising slowly, but I was up there, hovering free. There was no pain, no fear, just a calm so deep that it made the tears flow, even without a body to cry on. It was then that I saw it. The light. A living, pulsating light. Not white, but golden, like the sun breaking through the clouds at the end of the afternoon. And from it, 3 figures appeared, beings made of pure light. They had no face, no human form, but their eyes. Ah, the eyes. It was like being truly seen for the first time. They called me, not Sister Abigail, but Abigail. Just Abigail. And in that instant I understood. In the face of the eternal there are no titles, positions, nor hierarchies. I wanted to ask, where am I? What's going on? But before the words came out, they spoke. Not with a voice, but straight into my mind. You sought the truth, now it will be revealed. I felt my soul shake. Part of me wanted to run, to go back, but something bigger held me there like an invisible hug that said, trust. And it was there, floating between worlds, that the revelation began. They told me I would see, not heaven or hell as they taught, but the reality behind the walls I had dedicated my life to protecting, the invisible structure, the sham. The ground of light beneath my feet began to vibrate, and without understanding how, I was pulled forward to a place where the masks of the world began to fall, and where I would never be the same again. When I opened my eyes, if I still had eyes in that state, I was in a place that seemed to be made of air and fire at the same time. There was no floor, walls, ceiling, just an infinite space, vibrating as if I were inside the heart of the universe itself. And before me, something began to form. A vision. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was real. Real as pain. Real as life. I saw the history of the church that I swore to defend with my life. But it wasn't the story they tell us at masses or in catechisms. It was like being behind the scenes of a play, seeing the pulled strings, the false scenarios, the hidden tricks. I saw secret assemblies. I saw human hands tampering with sacred texts, cutting, altering, to transform what was freedom into blind obedience, to build an empire, and more than anything. I saw how everything was done not to bring souls closer to God, but to keep them trapped in an eternal cycle of fear, guilt, and submission. They showed me powerful figures, men dressed in gold and purple, laughing at secret feasts while in churches the people wept, asking forgiveness for sins that weren't even theirs. I saw popes who knew, cardinals who protected secrets. I saw documents being hidden in underground chambers, buried evidence that could free millions, but which was locked behind sacred seals to keep the flock in the dark. My heart screamed, "Abigail, no, it can't be. I spent my life kneeling before this. I spent my life serving something that looked like light on the outside, but hid darkness on the inside." It was then that an image ripped me apart inside. I saw the Pope, the current one. I saw his face, tired, heavy, carrying the weight of centuries of lies, and I saw his death, not as a punishment, but as a catalyst, a breaking point. The beings of light told me, with his fall the veil will be torn, what was hidden will emerge, souls will be confronted with the truth, and will have to choose, remain in the illusion or awaken. I was shaking, even without a body. Part of me wanted to run away. I wanted to go back to the convent, to the comfort of the daily prayers, the prayers that rocked me like a child. But I knew, something inside me knew, that comfort was the cage, and that now, the cage was falling apart. It was at that moment when my soul was bleeding, that the true horror began to unfold before me. I remember it as if it were now. After they told me that the veil would be torn, something in the space around me began to change. The golden light, once so soft, began to mix with thick, vivid shadows, like smoke filled with pain. I felt, Abigail, something is wrong. Very wrong. It was then that I saw it. Before me stood a colossal structure. It looked like a cathedral, but it was not made of stone or stained glass. It was made of solid shadow, like smoke that refused to dissipate. A monstrosity with twisted towers, endless corridors, and blind windows. A prison of the soul disguised as a holy temple. The facade was golden, dazzling, like a promise of salvation. But inside, my God, inside, it was something else. Every wall seemed to pulse with dense, heavy energy, made of fear, guilt, shame. And I saw how it was fed. Millions and millions of people praying, kneeling, asking for forgiveness. And without knowing it, feeding that invisible monster with their own light. I saw bishops, cardinals, popes, walking through the dark corridors. Their faces were a mask. On the outside, holiness. On the inside, thirst for power. I saw secrets being traded like coins. I saw abuses being hidden in the name of protecting the faith. I saw souls being bought, sold, forgotten. And then, I heard it. A sound. It wasn't human. It was the lament of trapped souls. Thousands, millions, consciences that had been deceived, imprisoned not by death but by lies disguised as faith. They cried without a voice, they asked without a mouth. They were like children abandoned in a labyrinth with no way out. My spiritual knees gave way. I cried out inside, God, where are you? And the answer did not come from the dark structure. It came from the beings of light, who still accompanied me from a distance. They whispered into my soul, it is not God who is absent. It is men who have moved away. The structure was not created by God. It was built, brick, by men. Men who learned early on that it was easier to control souls than to set them free, and that pretending to speak in the name of the light was the perfect disguise to hide one's own darkness. And then came the greatest revelation up to that point. They showed me that the very idea of needing intermediaries, of needing temples, dogmas, leaders, all of this was invented. The connection with the divine was always within us. Always. But we were taught to forget. I was shaking, all over. Even without a body, My soul was shaking. Everything I loved, everything I believed in, was crumbling before my eyes. And I knew there was still more to be shown, and the worst was yet to come. After seeing that structure of shadows, I thought I had seen everything, but the beings of light called me again. No words, just a presence so strong that it seemed to pull my essence to another place, an even deeper place, even more hidden. It was like passing through a portal, the space around me distorted, as if I was sucked into a golden tunnel that pulsed in waves of living energy. I didn't walk. I was carried away, like a leaf in the waters of an invisible river. And then I arrived, and I swear, I never, in my entire life, could have imagined a place like that. It was a library, but not just any library. It was alive, infinite. Shelves and more shelves that were lost on the horizon, full of books, parchments, artifacts, ancient globes, instruments that I couldn't even name. Each object there seemed to contain a story, a memory, a truth. The floor was made of solid golden light. The air vibrated with a silent melody, as if space itself was singing the truth that humanity has forgotten. One of the beings of light approached and, without speaking, transmitted to me a message. Here are kept all the forbidden truths. Everything that has been hidden is here. Everything that has been tampered with. Everything that has been distorted. Everything that has been burned in public squares. Everything that has been called heresy is here. My hands, if they were hands, trembled as I reached for one of the books. As soon as I touched it, I didn't need to read. Knowledge exploded inside me like a star. I saw ancient councils, men deciding in closed rooms what would be considered the word of God and what would be condemned as a lie. I saw how the ideas of spiritual autonomy, of direct connection with the divine source, were ripped out of sacred texts, how the idea of eternal guilt, hell, original sin, was planted as a trap to control entire generations. And I saw, above all, how the church, and not only it, but so many religious institutions, was built not to guide souls to freedom, but to keep consciences prisoner. All of this masked as holiness, charity, faith. My tears were no longer of sadness. They were of pain so deep that it seemed to tear the soul in half. I saw the original purity. I saw how the words of love and freedom were distorted until they became shackles. The beings left me there to see, to feel, to remember. It was as if they were saying, "It's not enough to see, you need to understand." And in that moment, Abigail died. Not my body, not my faith, but the old Abigail. The one who believed without questioning, the one who followed without seeing. And I knew it wasn't over yet. There was still something I needed to face, something that would change forever the way I would see the world of the living and the dead. Still in the middle of that living library, a force pulled me deeper. It was as if I was being led to the heart of everything, to the place where the greatest secret was hidden. I didn't walk, I was simply transported, as if the truth itself was calling me. The environment changed again. The endless shelves disappeared. And in front of me appeared something that looked like a room in the Vatican, but not like the ones we see in photos or movies. This was different. It was the real secret room. It was circular, of ancient stones covered in inscriptions glowing blood red. In the center there was a gigantic table made of a black material polished like a mirror. On it, documents, books, relics, everything that humanity has ever been able to see. And there, hovering over the table, I saw crystal clear images. I saw popes signing secret agreements, documents that manipulated the faith of millions in exchange for political power. I saw hidden alliances with kings, bankers, generals, The religion that was supposed to liberate, turning into an instrument of world domination. My spirit sank because in the middle of those papers I saw a letter, a handwritten letter, and in it what seemed to be a warning, a plan. The letter said, "When the last veil falls, the church will crumble. Secrets will be revealed, the flock will scatter, and new control will be necessary." It was like being punched in the soul. The approaching death of the Pope would not only be a tragic event. It would be the trigger that would make everything come to a head. The hoax would be unmasked, and then there would be chaos, but also the chance for true spiritual rebirth. The beings of light approached me again, and this time their eyes were serious. Very serious, they told me. "You have seen enough. When the time comes, the masks will fall. Many will resist. Many will deny. Many will try to rebuild the old prisons. But those who hear the call will walk free." I fell to my knees, or what was left of them, crying for all who still slept, crying for all who would be crushed by the weight of the truth that would come like an avalanche. And then they told me something that echoes to this day in every beat of my soul. True faith never needed walls. Divinity never required fear. God does not inhabit cathedrals. He inhabits hearts. It was there that I knew that the Pope's death would not be the end of an era. It would be the beginning of an awakening. A painful awakening, yes, but inevitable. And I, Abigail Monroe, would be witness to it, because, like it or not, I had seen it. I had been chosen to see. After seeing what I saw in that secret, I thought I had already reached the limit of what was bearable. But no, the most impressive thing was yet to come. The beings of light touched me again, not physically but directly in what I was, and in an instant I was taken to a new place. An immense space without floor, without ceiling, without end. And before me, floating like thousands of stars on a moonless night, were souls. But these souls were different. They shone, some with a faint flickering light, others like powerful headlights piercing the darkness. They were people, ordinary people, scattered everywhere. Cities, villages, prisons, hospitals, churches, anonymous houses. It was like seeing the entire planet breathing in little pulses of light. I saw mothers kneeling in prayer, but not praying to an institution, praying to something greater, something direct. I saw young people abandoning empty temples to seek God in the forests, in the wind, in their own hearts. I saw men and women breaking invisible chains they had carried for generations. And with each break, the structure of shadows that I had seen before trembled. It was as if an invisible web, as old as time itself, was beginning to tear, little crack by little crack. And then in the middle of that grandiose panorama, I saw something that cut into my soul in a way that I will never forget. I saw religious leaders, politicians, figures of power, all trying desperately to maintain the old order. Fiery speeches, veiled threats, appeals to fear. They tried to glue together the bricks of the old prison, but it was useless. The foundation was already crumbling from the inside out. And the being said to me in a voice so deep it seemed to come from within my own chest, "The death of the one who keeps the last mask will initiate the collapse. But what comes next will depend on the courage of the souls who awaken." I trembled, not with fear, but with reverence. It was like watching a cosmic birth, painful, bloody, desperate, but glorious. Humanity, as a whole, was beginning to wake up from an age-old nightmare, and the Pope's death would be the cry that would awaken millions. There, in that space between worlds, I understood that the church charade was not just human error. It was a collective experience. It was a lesson. It was a choice. And the souls who chose the truth, who had the courage to face the light, without intermediaries, would rebuild the world, not on fear, but on free love. My heart burned. I knew. I was seeing the beginning of the end. And the beginning of something so much greater, so much truer, that no human institution would be able to contain. After seeing the cracks in the old structure, I was taken to something even greater, something that seemed the heralding of a new era, but different from what I expected. There were no trumpets, no thunder, no angels descending in clouds of fire. The announcement was silent, but so powerful that the very fabric of the universe seemed to vibrate with it. The beings of light took me to a point from where I could see the entire Earth, not the physical Earth of maps and borders, but the spiritual Earth. And it shone, in scattered points still disconnected but growing fast. And then without a word, without a sound, they showed me. When the Pope died, a sequence of events would be triggered. First in the Vatican, then in the media, then in souls. The hidden documents that were hidden, the suppressed truths, would begin to escape. It would not be a leak. It would be a rupture. I saw newspapers being surprised by secret files. I saw ordinary, honest priests rising up in shock. I saw churches being emptied, people questioning everything they had always accepted without thinking. But more important than that, I saw something being born within every human being who dared to face the fall, a spark, a forgotten memory, the memory that the true connection with the divine was never outside, was never hidden behind altars or dogmas. It was always there, inside, always. And then, like soundless thunder, I felt the entire earth being crossed by a wave of energy, a vibration of freedom, of rupture, of new beginning. The invisible spiritual chains which had existed for centuries crackled and crumbled like glass under pressure. It was terrifying and beautiful. It was chaos and creation. It was the end of an age of fear and the beginning of an age of awakening. The great announcement would not be made with words. It would not come from the altars, nor from the religious palaces. It would come from the souls, from within. A silent current, but irresistible. A direct call from the heart to the infinite. And the beings of light told me, no one can stop it. They can try to erase, hide, distort. But the light, once lit inside, will never be contained. I knew, Abigail knew, that a silent war was approaching, not of weapons, but of consciences, and that I was now an invisible messenger of this awakening that no one else could stop. After feeling that wave vibrate through the earth, I thought everything was decided, that once the truth was revealed, everyone would simply accept it and be free. But I was wrong, deeply wrong. The beings of light took me even deeper, to see the part of the revelation that no one likes to talk about, the bitter part, the inevitable part. They showed me that not everyone would accept the truth. Many, even seeing the farce crumble before their eyes, would cling to the ruins. They would try to rebuild the old prison. They would try to block the light with their own hands. I saw people falling into despair, denying what was obvious. I saw religious leaders screaming, calling the new awakening the work of the devil. I saw crowds confused, torn in half between fear and freedom. It was like seeing an invisible battlefield, not of bodies but of souls. On one side, those who opened their eyes still scared, but determined to follow the light within. On the other, those who preferred to close their eyes and cling to the chains they already knew. Because fear is a difficult addiction to break. And then, something even more painful was shown to me. Institutions would not fall silent. They would try to survive. They would try to reinvent themselves. They would try to seduce, manipulate, threaten, as they always did, using new masks, new promises. But the beings told me, the structure may disguise itself, but the souls who have touched the light will no longer deceive themselves. That was it. The final choice would not be between religions, between doctrines, between leaders. It would be an internal, silent, individual choice. Remain in the comfortable lie, or walk, even if in fear, towards the frightening freedom of the truth. I saw faces. I saw souls being stripped of their certainties. Some fell into tears in despair, begging to return to the old security. Others, even though they were crying, took the first step out of prison, an uncertain step, but a free step. And in this scenario, Abigail, I, understood the greatest of secrets. God does not oblige. God does not demand. God only calls, and each soul is free to answer or to hide. I cried. I cried like I've never cried in my life, because for the first time I understood that the truth is not something we can impose. It's something that each person needs to choose, in the depths of their being. And the choice was coming. For everyone. For me. For you. For the whole world. After showing me the choice, after making me feel the weight of free will, the beings of light led me to the ultimate vision, the most powerful, the most unexpected. The space around me began to transform. The spiritual earth, which had previously seemed torn, wounded, began to shine in a new way, like an open wound that suddenly began to heal, to pulse with life. I saw what seemed impossible. From the ruins of the old order, from the ashes of lies, little gardens of light began to sprout. Not in temples, not in palaces, but in the hearts of ordinary people. I saw mothers teaching their children to talk directly with the divine without fear, without intermediaries. I saw elderly people previously trapped in dogmas smiling like children who found hope again. I saw young people gathering in circles under the stars to celebrate life. The truth, the light that never died, was just hidden. And the earth itself seemed to breathe differently. The trees, the rivers, the wind, everything vibrated in tune with that new awakening. The separation between the human and the sacred disappeared. It was all one. It always has been. And I saw that the fall of institutions would not be the end of faith. It would be its rebirth, true faith, faith that does not need gold crowns or marble altars, faith that is born and grows directly in the heart of every being who dares to look inside. The beings of light around me smiled, a smile made of warmth and eternity, and they told me, in a whisper that seemed to be made of all the songs in the universe, the new earth will not be built with stones, it will be built with free souls. I cried again, but this time, not from pain. I cried from hope. I cried because I understood that even in the midst of collapse, even in the pain of revelation, there was a greater purpose, a purpose that could not be destroyed, a purpose that was older than any empire, stronger than any lie. The new earth was already being born, not outside of us, but within, in every gaze that was freed, in every prayer whispered without fear, in every step taken towards the unknown, with courage and love. And I, Abigail Monroe, simple, small, imperfect, was part of it, not as a heroine, not as a martyr, but as a witness, as a seed. It was then that the beings looked at me one last time, and I knew it was time to return. The vision began to fade. The light became more distant, and I felt my being pulled back to the flesh, to the world, to the mission that I still needed to accomplish. As the world of light crumbled around me, I felt something strange, an impossible mix of sadness and gratitude. It was like waking up from a dream more real than any life I had ever lived. I knew I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to be part of that new earth forever. But that wasn't the mission. The beings of light approached for the last time. They didn't say words. They didn't need to. Their looks, their infinite smiles, said everything. It was as if they engraved something in me, something that no pain, no doubt, no forgetting could erase. A voice, not theirs, but as if from the very center of creation echoed within me. Take the memory, take the truth, and fear not. I felt my entire being vibrate with those words, as if they had become part of my own spiritual blood, as if every fiber of who I was had been redesigned to carry that mission. And then the pain of separation began. My being was pulled, ripped away from the light like someone being forcibly removed from the mother's womb. The light moved away, the gardens, the beings, the silent music. Everything was left behind like a home that I knew was mine, but that I still couldn't inhabit. I tried to extend my hands, I tried to cry out, but the force was greater. It was the call back, the call of life, the call of responsibility. And then, darkness, weight, pain, the feeling of being crushed into a body that seemed too small to contain everything I now knew. I opened my eyes, or rather they opened on their own. And there was the hospital, the cold lights, the muffled voices, the smell of ether and blood. It was back, and everything was different. What I saw, what I was shown, could not be forgotten. It could not be denied. It was engraved on me like a sacred seal. I still didn't know how, when, or where, but I knew that my mission was clear. When the Pope's death arrived, when the farce collapsed, when the world shook, my voice would have to echo. My story would have to be told. The truth would have to be released. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of love. Love for the souls that still slept. Love for the light that lives within each of us, waiting to be released. Thus ended my journey between worlds, and thus began my true life, as guardian of a truth as old as the sky itself, waiting just for the right moment to emerge like dawn after the darkest night. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.